Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading from the one-year Bible. My name's Stephen Mizell, and Jay Rivenbark and I are joined by Alyssa Bream this week. And today we're in the rare discussion of Proverbs on our podcast. We're looking at Proverbs 30 verses 7 through 9, and we talk about contentment and how we're affected by both wealth and poverty, pride and resentment, and how we can learn to practice balance and gratitude in our lives, and maybe some practical steps that you can have. So hope you'll get your Bible and a pen and paper, and let's have a conversation around the Word of God today. Hey everyone, today we're in the Proverbs section of today's reading. It's rare that we're going to create a whole podcast out of the Proverbs, because usually we only get a verse or two, and so it's limited amount that we can go into. But here we're looking at verses 7 through 9 of chapter 30. And the theme is kind of a balanced life. That's what he's talking about. And so Agur, he's kind of a lesser known sage. And he's praying for integrity and moderation. He says, give me neither poverty nor riches. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs, is kind of how he says it. Because he recognizes the spiritual dangers of both extremes, either dependence or despair, whichever way you want to look at it. And because it's such a short reading, pretty much anything I ask you, if it stuck out to you, we're going to probably cover in a question. So let's just kind of dive into the questions. Why is contentment so difficult to maintain?
I think our culture creates a lot of opportunities where we're not content. Things like comparison. You know, we see people around us, things they have, or at least perception of things I started to say own. Probably the bank probably owns most of it. But in things that we perceive that they have achieved, and our culture is such that it seems that it builds itself, even social media, where we can see the life of other people. And so there's always, whether we're intentionally doing it or not, there's always this comparison that's taking place. And that's a dangerous thing, because typically comparison is going to cause us to be either proud and arrogant or discontented, one of the two. And as he talks about in these couple of verses, extremes of any kind in any area of life are difficult. I think I've heard you use this term before as well. Pendulum swing to the extremes one way or the other, and they never stay the same, but either end can be dangerous.
I do think our culture, the American dream, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can always push more, you can always do that, adds to that culture of discontentment. But I think part of it is just the shifting circumstances of life, where you find a place you're content in, but then one thing changes. Maybe your spouse's job changes, maybe your kid goes to a new school, maybe your car breaks down, and like something is always changing in life. So it's hard to stay in that contentment. Even when we find it, something is always going to change that could just upset that balance and make it, man, I really need to get this figured out. I'm not in the and not live in the contentment.
That circumstance changing. I'm going to give you a weird illustration that just popped in my head as you were talking about how it will cause us to, I'm just going to speak for myself. It'll cause me to consider things, right, that I might not would have considered previously. So I'm not a gun owner. I mean, there are guns in the house, but I'm not a gun owner, and I don't carry a gun. And it's not that I'm opposed to it, right? It's just, I don't. But sometimes situations change, right? And I can think of 3 or 4 times over my life where situations changed that I thought, well, maybe I should, right? It could have been some laws were changing, and I wanted to make sure, okay, I want to do this before it goes away. Or there was some unrest in the community, and I thought, I want to make sure I need to be protected. Or I was traveling a lot on the road and wanted to make sure I was protected because I happened to be carrying money at the time. I never did. It never moved the needle, but there were different situations that popped up that triggered me to second guess a decision that I was content with, and I don't think it is this quest for more. For some people, it is money, but I think that's what we think of most of the time when we think of contentment, but it could be more power, more knowledge. It could be more influence,
relationships.
Right? Yeah, more relationships. We can never be content, and so or if we find a place of contentment, something happens and we want more of whatever it is, and it may not be necessary. We're trying to either prove something to ourselves, or prove something to other people, or to gain value.
I think it was Paul in Philippians, in Philippians that said, I've learned whatever state or condition I'm in to be content, which I think is important to note. It is a process. I think it is a sign of maturity over time that you have to be intentional about guarding and fostering contentment.
I think it is natural for us to want to pray. That's not right. Want to desire fame or fortune or success by whatever the measure is. I think it's a natural tendency for everybody. But what he's trying to tell us, it appears to me, is that integrity and balance are more important than success or fame. And, I think on the previous podcast, Alyssa, you mentioned the impact Edenton and this church had on your children. Without a doubt, you and Tyler are going to do more shaping of that than anybody else is, in the home. But the community and the church are going to have a significant impact, and in a different place, right? Their lives may be completely different. And I think sometimes we want certain things that come with fame and fortune, but we miss the other impacts that also might come along with it. So how can both wealth and poverty become spiritual traps?
I think both wealthy people and poor people, and really anyone, but greed can be just a thorn in the flesh. Is that the right saying? Because I think the poor people, the people in poverty, they need that money. And so they will maybe do anything to get it. And people that are rich, you can never have enough, and it feels like. And so keep pushing. But I think wealth brings pride, distraction, and idolatry of those riches. And I think poverty can bring despair, envy, and fear. So really, whichever side you fall on there, it really can affect your spiritual life if you are in one of those states. And it's something that you have to continually guard against if you are in one of those places.
Wealth, I think, by its very nature, can easily lead us to being proud or arrogant, thinking we're self-sufficient. And I think there's another side as it relates to this contentment issue, that the more things you have, the more, quote, wealth by our standards that you have, it's easily to be distracted and discontented because you're always trying to figure out how to hold on to it or how to create more of it. And so the very thing that you once pursued that you thought would bring contentment now brings discontentment because you're always chasing or afraid of losing. And as Alyssa alluded to, if you're on the other side of that poverty, it can tempt you to do things that you shouldn't do, immoral, illegal, sinful, otherwise. But I think the biggest danger for discontentment comes from that perspective is questioning God. Why? Why do I not have what they have? Why haven't I been given the opportunities? Or maybe because of my upbringing and background, I may never have some of those opportunities. And so discontentment can find its way in either one of those equations very easily.
I think wealth, the danger is pride. I think poverty, the danger is resentment. And I do not come from the belief that you have to force it, right? But so like I had a question this past week. Well, I guess it's been in the last week that I pondered. In the last 10 days of us recording this, so it would have been in the last 60 days of you hearing this. The Tesla shareholders approved a pay package for Elon Musk that could equal $1 trillion. I don't know if y'all saw that or not. Yeah. In the end, we can't even think in those numbers, and I'm certainly not an impoverished person, but I can't comprehend. But the question, this is how I think. I'm not opposed to, if somebody's ideas or brilliance brings that to them, I have zero opposition to that. The question that I had, and I still have today, is what are you going to do with it?
Right.
Right. How is the world going to be better because you received this, well, because $1 trillion is, I remember when the first company passed the $1 trillion valuation. I mean, it's just an astronomical figure. I think that's the question, is not do you have it or have you achieved it? It's what difference are you making if you get it? Is the goal just to get it, right? If the goal is just to get it, to prove everybody you could get it, you got it for the wrong reasons, and probably not much good is going. You're probably going to be worse off in the end, and maybe everybody else is going to be worse. If you got it to improve the world, right? If there's some good that's going to come out of it, and it doesn't even have to be what I consider to be good, but are you trying to improve the lives of people? And I probably should pull this up. I should have before I use this as an illustration. I would be curious how many nations in the world's GDP doesn't even reach $1 trillion in a year.
How would you even spend $1 trillion? Like, I think it would take so many lifetimes for a person to spend $1 trillion.
Well, he's got plenty of kids. I don't know how many. It's like 17 or 18 kids.
Does he know how many he has?
I don't know, but I mean, he's got 17 or 18 that are accounted for. Let me put it that. Am I right? It's a large number.
Yes, he has a large number.
He gets another $1 trillion pay package. He'll have some more coming out for identification purposes.
Exactly.
Me.
Well, I don't think you can spend.
Right. And so it just becomes hoarding.
But like you said, it goes back to, what are you going to do with it, though? The motivation, whether it's those numbers, whether it's $1 million, whether it's $1,000. I mean, the reality is it's a gauge of the heart.
Not church statistics, but there's plenty of statistics out there. Now, I have the feeling that this has shifted, especially in the last 5 years, because inflation has just been out of whack, cost of living and all those things. But for years, the magic number was $75,000. That once you made $75,000, the amount,
the percentage of giving.
Well, no. The amount of difference it made in your happiness above that, 75,000 to $1 trillion, whatever, it went up almost negligible, right? That your happiness and peace at $75,000 was the number. That was the magic number. I would think it's probably higher than that today because just cost of living and the housing it's got to be higher than that. But we think in terms of $1 million, or if I made $500,000 or I made $250,000, but statistically that's just not true. It only moves the needle slightly after what we consider to be a fairly average number. And I think we put too much emphasis on it. We think that it's going to make us happier, and it just never does. So what are some practical steps people can do to live in balance and gratitude?
One of the things is just always recognize where it come from. And even Scripture points this out. Deuteronomy, it is God who gives us the power to get wealth, whatever that measure is, whether it's $50,000 a year or whether it's the $1 trillion, that ultimately it is God, whether it's through thought process, ideas, ability, skill sets. So it all comes from God. So literally it all belongs to Him, and we should be good stewards of that, because it's with anything God gives us, gifts, talents, abilities, time, resources. The more we have, the more responsibility is attached to the stewardship of it. And so that should be a reminder. And James tells us every good and perfect gift comes from God. And so I think that balance part comes from recognizing it is all ultimately a gift from God. And without Him, we have none of these things.
There's a book study going on Wednesday nights that I'm part of, and it's, oh goodness, what is it? I want to say it's Rhythms of the Household, but there's something that's not quite the right words. And one of the things that it talked about was really building those practices with your children and prayer. And I have found that, I said this in staff meeting the other day, that I found myself praying a phrase and I was like, where did I get this phrase from? And then I realized it was from you, Steve. And so the thank you for all of the gifts you have given us, or something like that, is a phrase that I've heard you pray a lot of times. And I pray that with my kids when I pray with them. And then my oldest son came back and he's like, you know what? I'm going to pray for the rest of my life. He said, I'm going to thank God for the gifts He has given us and the gifts He will give us. And I think that building those habits young, where you're thanking God when you are thankful that you can go afford a burrito, thanking God. Then when you can go buy a Tesla, you'll still be thanking God, And I think building those habits when maybe you aren't in the position you want to be of being grateful is really important. And that person who was thankful that they had a burrito, they said that is going to be the measure for the rest of their life. And they're like a fairly, like, within their sphere of influence, they are fairly well off at this point. And they're like, I want to be able to not check my bank account before I have to get a burrito.
Habits of the Household by Justin.
Yeah.
Early.
Yeah. And he has
seen that come across my news feed yesterday is why.
And he has one that is, I think it's called, he has one that's like a family one. And then he has one for individuals too, for building a common practice in your life of integrating spiritual things. And I think that he'd probably talk about kind of those kind of things in both of them.
But I think that's where contentment begins, though, is being grateful for the little things, for the ability to go get the burrito, to recognize that truly.
Without checking your bank account.
Without checking your bank account, and the fact that you have this strength and ability to eat it, you can taste it and enjoy it, and perhaps share company with somebody that you care about all at the same time. There's a multitude of gifts in there.
There's a couple of things. The burrito thing reminded me, people also ask me about my personal journey paying tithes, and it was pretty much drilled into me when I was a kid. We got paid $3 to cut the grass and keep the churchyard up, but we got paid 2 $1 bills and 10 dimes because 3 of those dimes had to be paid tithes. So I was taught early, but I went through a period of time in my life where I made no money. I mean, I was losing real money. I mean, I don't mind losing money on paper. I think that's smart. But when you're losing real money, that's not smart. And I had no money to give, no money to pay tithes. And I recognize today what a privilege it is. And you couldn't take it away from me because I'm thankful that I have an income to do it. But the concept that what I read here is almost the Lord's Prayer. Give me this day my daily bread. And I have, if you could go back and read my journal over the last year, we've I've stretched myself to do some things with the business that were more than I probably needed to take on at that particular time. And over again, if you read the gratitude piece that I write every evening, I write one in the morning, one in the evening, it would say, God provided enough again today. Thank you for joining us again today on this edition of One Single Story. Agur reminds us in this passage that balance isn't boredom, it's peace. And sometimes peace looks like an honest lament before God when we're in that situation. Hope you'll join us again on the next edition of One Single Story.